before we go ahead and start this, I want to let you guys know that if you're receiving this on Sunday at this point, this probably issue has already passed. But if it is still going, you probably will see this video way later. So basically what's going on is that YouTube is, for some reason, like, whenever I try and upload a video, it kind of just glitches out on something. And I tried restarting my phone, like deleting YouTube or reinstalling it, like tried numerous other options, and you know, it didn't work. I uploaded another way, which is much more difficult. But luckily now it's starting to work, hopefully by now, but I really do hope that doesn't happen again. I've been trying to upload the video before this one for the past 2 to 3 days. Very fucking annoying, I'll tell you that much. But if you already see that video by Friday, either I've uploaded a different way or the issue has been fixed. I really hope it has been fixed, because I'm gonna lose my utter brain cells if it isn't. So if you're receiving this video late, it's most likely because of that problem. I just want to let you guys know and push that out of the way before we officially get started. This is chapter 13, Recollections, okay? This is where the recap starts. So basically we go on a kind of like a dialogue of things of Cody, not him talking per se, but like Cody describing Cody. Makes sense? So he was at his work and wearing what he usually wears and saying that, you know, not saying, but, you know, describing how his boss would complain, etc., etc., because, you know, whatever. And yeah, he was thinking about, like, he was also saying, like, yeah, well, I'm being paid really well at a mediocre whatever cafe. And then, yeah. And they kind of compared it to Starbucks. Starbucks is way better and less basic, right? And talking about school and, you know, and how sleep deprived he's been, and now it's kind of hard for him to learn, which we've heard more back about this and everything. And learning he preferred to be a nobody because no one liked the way he usually is, which is, you know, a smart, bubbly kind of guy, you know. And oh goodness, this is like way back whenever a social worker came up to the house with skipping all the really deep details that he was in. Basically, what is it again? The social worker basically took him out of the home and put him in an adoption center. But that wasn't really better either, but it wasn't that bad. He got bullied, severely bullied, until he got out. I believe an old guy adopted him. And old guy was this type of scientist and has his own laboratory. Cody basically used the laboratory to starting his his experiments on viruses, and was starting to get really good at it. And then he never really attended school because he was not really required by the old man. Then the older man started nagging him to go back into school, etc., etc., etc. later on, because the people were starting to complain that he wasn't going to school, and I believe, or getting a job and whatnot. And he was purposely doing his worst job, attempting to get these jobs. But eventually, the old man had a friend where basically got him a good job, whether he liked it or not. And he has been working there ever since. And this is now a part where he was like working currently at the cash register. 3 bitches, you know, just being bitches, kind of being rude, and kind of judging him without knowing him, which is bullshit, you know what I'm saying? And after they skipped the line because they didn't want him to make the whatever drink they wanted, we came up, coincidences, right? And we were like, those girls, you can make my machado, I don't mind. That girl seems busy, you can make it. And then, you know, to try and make him feel better. And he was like, sure. he was like, probably like tearing up. Probably like tearing up. And obviously we were much more respectful and much more nicer and etc, etc, etc. So now we are officially... Hey everyone, so I wanted to give you guys a couple of warnings before you get started reading the story, or listening to it, excuse me. So first things first, I would like to mention that there will be mentions of eating disorders and everything like that, and there will be even a whole author note about it, and I will make sure to put that in chapters as well, so you guys can go and listen to it, because I think it's quite beautiful and it should be said a lot more often. Also, there will also be mentions of dehumanizing. If you guys don't know what dehumanizing is, it will be to the side of the screen what the definition is. But Leslie's definition of it is basically treating the said person as not a person, as merely something that is disgusting, wasteful, and just trash. Treating them as if they're nothing, and just treating them as nothing but an it. So yeah, it's kind of sad, but you know, it is what it is. It's in the story. But you guys have been warned, and if you guys are not comfortable with either of those, please do not watch this video. But yeah, you guys have been warned. In chapter 14. Yes, I do apologize for saying certain things. I apologize. That was a mistake of mine. But yes, we are officially in chapter 14. 14. Subjects. And then FI equals Ryan's first initial. I will not remember that, so just keep that in mind though. I'll just say FI. Excuse me. Letting out a sleepy yawn, Cody allowed his eyes to flutter closed once again and nuzzled his head further into the gap in between Ryan's neck and shoulders, simultaneously drawing her closer to his chest and tightening his hold on her, as he currently had his arms tightly coiled around her waist. In response, Ryan let out a soft little noise in her sleep and unconsciously leaned into his squeezing hold, curling closer into him. Cody let out a content sigh, wishing that this moment of pure bliss, peace, and tranquility would never end. He'd be content to just lay in this spot with her for minutes, or even hours. He'd be fine. He'd be even fine if life just was this: security, structure, and safety. He could only find it in her touch. Yet, unfortunately, he would have to get up soon. He would be exceedingly careful to not stir her from her peaceful slumber, of course. If anyone needed sleep, it was her. He would take care of her. The one who had been the safekeeper of his emotions for so long, seemingly popping up whenever he needed her. It was time for him to return the favor. If only he could just lay here for a few minutes more. Keeping one arm in its secure hold on her, he reached his other arm out of the bed and grabbed his phone, glancing at the screen and eyes slightly squinting in complaint of the harsh and imposing light that his phone emitted. It was now 3:30 in the morning. Time to get up, he supposed. He had things to take care of before Ryan woke up for good. After all, he didn't want her to wake up alone, for she didn't go to sleep alone. That's not to say that anything really happened between the two of them after they climbed into bed together that night. She was feeling nervous about it all. He could feel her timidness himself around her cheeks, like fifth disease. He tried to be sensitive to her nervousness. He really did, but he had waited so long for this moment. And after about 10 minutes of laying in awkward silence, he just scooted himself just a bit closer to her before wrapping his arms around her. If she had a negative reaction to his advances, he would of course back off, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned into him before closing her eyes and promptly drifting off, almost as if his touch was a powerful, sleep-inducing drug. In fact, it was all too easy for him to follow her to the world of sleep, and he would not be subjected to laying awake for hours, tossing and turning relentlessly as his constant thoughts, ideas, and wandering mind tormented him. Not tonight. He would sleep peacefully. Until he had to wake up, that is. Glaring for a moment in distaste at the numbers on his phone screen, hellishly broadcasting the exact time, he realized in ultimate dissatisfaction that he did need to get up. Making sure that she was still fast asleep, he sweetly pressed his lips to her temple, his eyelashes softly grazing across her skin in the softest of butterfly kisses before pulling away to observe her reaction. Her face scrunched up just slightly at the light contact, before settling back down into an expression of sincerity as she reached for his arm in her sleep and latched onto it, unconsciously pulling him back towards her. Oh, how he wished he could stay. Pulling himself away completely and clambering out of bed before she could further convince him otherwise, he quickly grabbed his favorite pink weighted blanket and tucked it around her still sleeping body. After all, she began to swarm uncontrollably in her sleep as she had obviously lost a significant source of heat and stability. Forcing himself to tear his eyes away from her, he left the room as quietly as he could, although he had accidentally stubbed his toe on the side of his dresser as he had attempted to navigate his way through the room in the dark. Choking down foul language and blinking back a few tears at the most unwelcoming impact. I know how it feels, buddy. His gaze shot towards YN in fear, as he was afraid that the noise would have woken her up. Thankfully, though, she didn't stir. Maybe the weighted blanket was working its magic on her, just like it did for him. Cody would have grinned if his pinky toe didn't hurt so damn much. Silently passing through the hallway of the second floor, he paused briefly at the closed door of his spare bedroom and took a quick listen. That other girl. That one YN was so fond of, annoyingly enough, still seemed to be sleeping, or at least he had assumed that she was trying her best to get to sleep. She was, of course, rather shaken up after the night's events and probably wasn't doing very well in terms of sleep. What was her name again? Jessie or Jackie or something else like that. Whatever, it didn't matter. Entering his kitchen, Cody grabbed a quick drink of iced tea before heading off to begin his work, hearing a tiny, completely muffled mew and greeting entering the kitchen as well. Cody spun around happily at the entrance of his kitten. "Coco," he greeted happily, being mindful to keep his voice down to the best of his ability. "You've got something for me?" The little cat peered up at him through gorgeous, crystal blue eyes and attempted to mew again, yet had a bit of difficulty due to the rat that was resting between his jaws. The rat was still alive, much to Cody's pleasure. Cody rather liked it when Coco brought the rats to him still alive, although he understood that sometimes they had already met their demise due to Coco's strong teeth. After all, Coco, as intelligent as he was still just a cat. "Good boy," Cody beamed, patting the cat lightly on the head and picking up the rat by its tail with his forefinger and thumb after pulling on a pair of gloves. He made it a point to keep boxes of gloves in every room of his house. No, for he never really knew when Coco would come and find him with another prize, and Cody hated touching animals as dirty and disgusting as rats. Those little creatures that crawled over heaps of garbage, the carcasses of dead animals, and maybe even hung out in sewers, and picking up only God knows what type of germs or bacteria that rested in such places. Cody absolutely despised dirt and germs. It reminded him of the apartment that he used to live with his filthy mother and her vomit-inducing boyfriend. That was why he made a point to test his creations out on what he considered to be animals' kingdom's most disgusting of creatures. And he relied on Coco to go out and find them. After all, it wasn't like he wanted to go out and buy lab rats that were bred in captivity. Those that were otherwise clean and sanitary. Damn, bro, you're brutal. I'll get you some wet food after I get rid of this thing. Cody promised Coco, who instantly began to purr and rub his fluffy body against the back of Cody's ankles. Cody grinned. what a good kitten. His little partner in crime. Opening the door to the basement with his free hand, Cody grimaced as he observed the rat thrashing violently in his grip, letting out a squeak in protest. The rat attempted to curl against Cody's finger and take a bite, and Cody couldn't help the noise of disgust that he let out at the mere thought. Coco trotted after Cody diligently, blue eyes never leaving the rat that was trapped in Cody's grip, ready to pounce immediately and begin a chase should the rat manage to wiggle itself free. After all, such an occurrence had unfortunately happened before, and the last thing that either Cody or Coco needed was a rat on the loose in their spotless, sanitary house. Never again would Cody live with rats and cockroaches. He refused. Fortunately for the boy and his kitten, the rat did not manage to escape this time. Entering his laboratory, Cody crossed to the side where he kept his cages of rats and opened up a lid to one of his empty cases. "Here you go, you nasty rat," Cody said in an innocent and happy voice that eerily constricted with the words that he spoke. "Home sweet home." Finally letting go of the rat's tail, he dropped the unfortunate creature into the case before promptly slamming the lid back on top and securing it tightly, allowing the rat absolutely no chances to escape. He would inject it later. After all, he was rather interested in seeing how the rat reacted to his new virus as opposed to his human subject. His human subject would be only referred to as Subject H4A, the first human subject of his fourth attempt at Project FI. Peeling off his gloves and promptly disposing of them before sanitizing his hands, he pulled out his most current research journal and made a few more notes in it, being sure to properly identify his two subjects, Subject H4A, the human, and Subject R4A, the rat. As he was writing, his ears instantly picked up on the sound of footsteps as someone paced about the laboratory with him, yet he didn't pay the noise much attention. He was used to 17 poking and probing about in his lab, and he never really minded as long as 17 didn't mess anything up, and he put everything back into its proper place. 17 understood and respected Cody's need to be organized, thankfully enough. Subject R4A, 17 drawled as he read over Cody's shoulder. "Come on, man, give her an actual name. What makes you think the rat is a her?" Cody demanded, sending the blonde-haired boy beside him an irritated side-eyed glance. "Anatomy?" 17 snickered. "I don't care if the rat is a her or a him," Cody countered. "The thing is nothing but an it to me. I'm not naming it." "Well, you're no fun," 17 sighed, folding his arms across his chest, and Cody rolled his eyes, of course. He liked 17 very much. He had been a loyal imaginary friend for years, and had helped Cody out in a lot of situations that would otherwise have resulted in turmoil. Yet at the same time, Cody felt a bit like he was starting to outgrow 17 over the past few years, as 17 hadn't aged. It was like 21-year-old Cody hanging out with a 15-year-old. Still doable, but starting to become more difficult to connect with. He wondered if 17 felt the same way. "You gonna fix up the human girl yet?" 17 inquired. "What's her name again?" "Subject H4A," Cody confirmed. "I haven't done anything yet. In fact, it might still be unconscious in the isolation room." "You gonna check?" 17 probed as he peered at a vial inside of Cody's Sub-Zero freezer, eyebrows raising rather impressively at the clear liquid that rested inside. He ran his fingers through his long blonde hair before tying it into a ponytail. "I probably should soon," Cody agreed. "The injection should be a lot easier if it's still out cold." Crossing the room with 17 eagerly at his heels, Cody made to put on proper personal protective equipment before entering the isolation room and handling his virus. Pulling on a disposable isolation gown over his clothes, fitting a hairnet over his head, applying 2 sets of gloves on his hands and mesh foot coverings over his feet. He ended his ridiculous looking get up with his blue welder glasses for eye protection and his raptor mask. 17 would have laughed at Cody, but he was rather used to seeing Cody in these clothes. 17 had often accompanied Cody for the injections of his human subjects. For some reason, he rather enjoyed watching the process, something that Cody appreciated. Twirling a syringe skillfully in between two fingers, he lastly grabbed the vial that 17 had previously been admiring, undoing several locks that he held in his negative pressure isolation room securely closed. He and 17 silently entered. There, laying slumped over in the same corner that Cody had originally left it, sat subject H4A. Its bleach blonde hair covered its face in tangles, and Cody grinned behind his raptor mask. It was still out cold. Perfect. Closing the door behind him in order to ensure that no dangerous pathogens would leak out of his work case or in the world beyond, he tightly grabbed a hold of his subject's wrist and yanked his arm towards him. Twirling the syringe one file at a time, he positioned it perfectly above his intended injection spot before reaching up and hitting the record button on a voice recording device that he had set up in one of his shelves in the room, keeping it there for note-taking purposes in the isolation room. September 15th, year 20 redacted. Time is 0413. Initial injection of the first attempt at Project FL. Second strain. Fourth attempt overall. Subject is currently unconscious. Malnutrition due to subject's own doing noted upon injection. Height at 5'4". Weight at 91 pounds. Hooked up to the vital signs machine with a current temporal temperature of 97.9. You sound like a prick. Jet 17 jeered with a smirk on his face, but Cody ignored him, pressing the stop button on his recording device. Cody brought his syringe down into the subject's arm and pressed it down harshly, allowing the lethal substance to course through its veins and slowly begin its dirty work. It was done. The subject had been infected. Then the freaking author was like, God, Cody is a complex character. For real. And then the author also wanted to say this. Roxy is mentioned to be 91 pounds and to be 5'4" tall. Remember that Roxy is portrayed to having an eating disorder. She is not at a healthy weight for her height. I am by no means attempting to use this character to portray in an ideal weight, good eating habits, or a healthy relationship with food / one's own body. Please stay safe, everyone. If you feel that you may have an unhealthy relationship with food / your body, I urge you to seek out help. You are worth it. Heart. Now, thank you for the author that said that, because honestly, there is way too many people out there that are just very unhealthy with their body and have very bad eating disorders. Like, there was, like, have you guys seen that? Am I the only one who has seen that Reddit where this mother basically made her children have eating disorders and they're like 10 years old? Like, in like elementary / middle school years? Yeah. Terrible person. And she's like, am I the asshole? And I'm like, girl, what makes you think you aren't the asshole? Your daughters have eating disorders. And you caused that with your husband. Yeah, girl, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But I'm not the yes, you are. Anyway, but if you guys have heard, if you guys have heard that, let me know. Let me know, fools. Just let your girl know, okay? Alright, y'all, so he is in chapter 14, Controversies. You were awoken that morning to the tight and constricting feeling of two scrawny arms warmly squeezing your waist and your back pressed snugly against a bony chest. Locks of chocolate brown hair cascaded across your face and slightly obstructed your vision, due to how closely Cody had burrowed his face into your neck. You would have reached your hands up in order to lightly pat your cheeks in an attempt to get over your current embarrassment, but Cody only further tightened his grasp on you, shifting his hold just slightly so he would be able to grab onto your hands and intertwine your fingers. Not yet, he sleepily muttered under your skin, his lips grazing across your neck, and resulting in unintentionally kisses as he spoke. You attempted to ignore the seemingly electrical charge sensation buzzing through your neck at the physical contact. The touching urging you to take things a step forward, despite your current state of early morning drowsiness. Some strange state of heightened pressure that only seemed to happen when you drifted in between the realms of sleeping and waking. Allowing your eyes to fully open, you squinted in distaste at the intruding streams of morning sunlight that shone through the slightly parted curtains on the bedroom window. Shifting around a bit more, you miraculously managed to flip yourself around so you were now facing Cody, and attempted to lean back in order to catch a glimpse of his face. It was only then when you noticed that he was fully awake too, and you wondered if he was woken up before or after you. Either way, he still looked rather tired, and you wondered if he had not gotten as much sleep as you had. If he hadn't, you certainly didn't notice, for you had probably blacked out almost as soon as you had felt Cody wrap his arms around you for that first time. "Morning," he murmured, his green eyes boring into yours as he pulled your body in a bit closer to him. A movement that he didn't even know was possible at this point, but somehow he managed. Reaching a hand up, softly pushing some hair out of your face, and allowing his hand to come to a rest on your cheek, his fingers curling around the back of your head, as he allowed strands of hair to fall in between the spaces in between his fingers. "Sleep well?" "Strangely enough, I did," you answered, settling to focus your gaze on the lower half of his face instead, for you did not feel bold enough to look at him directly in the eye at this exact moment. Cody sent you the softest, yet most unreadable smile at your words before, uncharacteristically, choosing to say nothing in response. His eyes lit up as he stared upon your face to the point where they almost seemed to sparkle. One thing was for certain, he adored you. When you laid right there, cuddled up in his arms and in his bed, it almost felt like nothing else mattered. Everything else in the world was instantly wiped from your mind. It was just you and him, almost as if his very presence cast you under the most intoxicating of magical spells. Yet, there was no such thing as magic. Was it a spell? Or was it a sickness? Or what were you feeling something entirely within your own mind? An illusion? Or a delusion? No matter what it was, whenever you were around him, everything dark and cold went away. When you were with him, the world was warm. But what about Jossie? Almost as soon as the memory of your friend burst through your mind, you lightly pressed your hands down onto the mattress of Cody's bed and pushed yourself up. And it didn't seem that Cody was too happy about it. While he didn't vocalize any noise of complaint, his smile slightly faded, and the sparkle in his eyes dimmed. He pushed himself up into a sitting position as well and simply stared at you questioningly, wondering why you were getting up so suddenly. For some reason, his silence was unnerving. "You said that Jossie was in the second bedroom, right?" you asked. "I wonder if she's awake yet." "Oh, yeah," Cody agreed happily. "That's where she is. I'm just gonna go check on her," you announced lightly, pushing the covers off you entirely and swinging your legs over the edge of the bed. Standing up straight, you let out a lengthy stretch as some bones and joints on your back and limbs satisfyingly popped. "I'll make you some coffee," Cody called out after you, as you made to leave the room. "I don't have the equipment to make you macchiato, but I hope black coffee is fine." Ick, black coffee. You couldn't say that you cared for it. It was bitter, scandalous, and overall just not your thing. Yet you didn't want to be rude, did you? He had opened his house up to you and your friend, and he had essentially helped you get rid of the crime that you had committed. You weren't about to be picky towards the drink he had decided to make for you. Turning around, you send him an appreciative smile over your shoulder. That sounds great, Cody. Thanks. Cody smiled lightly back in return, but his smile wasn't nearly as bright as when he had first grinned upon you waking up. Ultimately, deciding to leave Cody to his own devices, you made your way down the hallway towards the bedroom that Jossie was staying at. Along the way, you noticed Cody's little cat, Coco, trotting down the hallway in the opposite direction as you. As he was clearly making a beeline towards his owner, you had attempted to reach down and pet the kitten, but he merely slipped by you without a care in the world. He did not look in your direction, nor did he even acknowledge you. It was almost as if he didn't see you. Watching in slight regret as the kitten's gray's and white striped tail swished around the doorframe to Cody's bedroom, you let out a small sigh as you continued to head off to Jossie's room. Well, you suppose that not all animals like to be touched by strangers. You could respect that. Pausing outside of the door that you assumed to be Jossie's, you knocked lightly before calling out to her, not much wanting to wake her should she still be sleeping. Jossie? You asked softly. It's me. Yay. Quiet shuffling could be heard on the other side of the door before it eventually swung open. Hey. Jossie greeted rather tiredly, and you took a step back in order to observe her. All in all, Jossie looked awful. Not to say that she looked bad, as she still managed to look just as beautiful to you as ever, but she definitely looked like she had a rough time. It was obvious that she had laid down on the bed immediately after getting out of the shower that previous night, not even bothering to blow dry her hair, as her short black hair had some of the worst unfortunate cases of bedhead. Deep bags under her eyes suggested maybe an hour of sleep at the very most, and she looked unusually squirrely and jumpy, despite the fact that she was currently safe and sound. Jossie, you breathed, and she took a step back in order to allow you inside her room. Letting out a sigh, you quickly located a hairbrush that Jossie had neglected to use the night before and sat yourself upon her bed, gesturing for her to join you. She reluctantly did so, lightly perching on the edge of the bed with her back facing you, and you instantly began to work on pulling the brush through her hair and at least attempting to get it to lay straight. You cursed a few times as you began to work out the knots that had formed into her hair as well, no doubt due to a night of endless tossing and turning. You gotta pull it together, you muttered quietly. You know they're gonna call me in, Jossie whispered as she turned around to look at you, the fear in her eyes completely obvious. The police, she confirmed, as you had raised an eyebrow in her direction in an indication that you wanted her to elaborate. I was his girlfriend. They're going to want to question me. Well, it was apparent that Jossie had a lot of time to think over things, and you couldn't deny that her anxieties were valid and very much possible. They're going to find out, she continued, her voice growing shaky and a bit more detached as she finally began to vocalize her terror. They'll know I killed him. I killed him, Jossie, you said strongly, in a voice that, very strangely, did not hint at fear. Why weren't you scared like Jossie? Jossie spun around again and blinked at you in confusion. What? No, I did. Are you sure you're remembering things correctly? You asked slowly, staring at Jossie in an equal amount of confusion at the disagreement between the remembrance of events. Yes, Jossie stated in fearful, yet undeniable and absolutely convincing confidence. I killed him. I used a hammer. Oh no. Oh God, fuck. What? You jumped a bit. Instantly alarmed at the newfound agitation that coated Jossie's voice. The hammer! She gasped, standing up straight and running her fingers through her hair in distress, instantly undoing all the work that you had managed to make on pulling the brush through her hair. The fucking murder weapon. I left it there. I used it. And they'll know it was me because my fingerprints are all over it. Cody wiped that stuff down. You rebutted, trying your absolute best to keep her calm, but quickly failing. No, he didn't. Jossie stuttered, wrapping her arms protectively around herself as she began to pace around the room. He didn't do anything like that. I remember him doing that, though. You attempted to reason. You were very upset and shook up. Maybe you just didn't notice, you think? Jossie asked, looking towards you with wide brown eyes open in fear. Her body trembled and shook in stress and terror, and she harshly rubbed her upper arms with her hands in an attempt to release her nervous agitation. He did. You nodded. We can ask him, though, if you want. I think he's downstairs. I don't like that guy, Jossie admitted as she approached you and reached out, grabbing your hands once again and intertwining your fingers before pulling you closer to her. Your heart skipped a beat. He gives me the creeps, if I had to be honest, and it's even worse that he knows that I killed Damien. There's just something about him. Something isn't right. Come on, you muttered, not much wanting to get caught in the middle of anything that may happen between Cody and Jossie. It was obvious that the two were not very fond of each other. Keeping a hold on Jossie's hand, you pulled her down the stairs, Jossie trailing just slightly behind you in nervousness, most likely dreading Cody's answer to her query, if he had cleaned off her hammer or not. Luckily for you, Cody was in the kitchen just as you suspected he would be. Cody, you greeted, and Cody spun around with another one of his dimpled smiles, a smile that vanished as his eyes settled onto your and Jossie's intertwined fingers. You decided to ignore this for now. You had more important things to worry about. We were wondering about something that happened last night, you began, and Cody nodded quietly for you to continue. For some reason, you did not like his quietness. Weapons that were used, you cleaned them off, right? Of course I did, Cody confirmed, before turning back around to his coffee maker and grabbing a Mickey Mouse coffee mug and filling it to the brim with scalding hot black coffee. For you, he offered. Oh, thank you, you murmured quietly before looking towards Jossie in order to gauge her reaction. Jossie did not look comforted in the slightest. Just as you were about to open your mouth and say something else to Jossie, Cody's little kitten entered the room once again. You watched in curiosity as the cat merely walked past you before coming to a stop in front of Jossie, staring up at Jossie through bright blue eyes. The cat gave out a little mew, obviously looking for attention. As Jossie reached down to oblige the little animal's request, you attempted to distract yourself by taking a sip of black coffee that Cody had made for you. Strangely enough, you found that you rather liked the taste. You took another sip. Cody noticed you drinking the coffee and grinned. Oh, what the hell you put in my coffee? What the fuck he put in my coffee? Oh my goodness. No. I'm not good with hints, fool. I'm really not good with hints, but... Ugh. Yes, it is getting weird, but it's getting good. It's getting good. Alright, y'all. So I believe we're in chapter 16, I believe. I may be wrong, but I'll just correct myself on the screen, but I believe we're in chapter 16. Right. Roxy's eyes slowly flitted open, and she let out a grunt of discomfort at the coursing pain that was running through her head. She reached her weak and frail hands up in order to rub tenderly at her head, attempting to relieve some of the pressure on her skull from the horrific headache that had currently befallen her. Yet it was hard. In fact, it was quite difficult to even see what was in front of her and observe her surroundings, as her headache made her feel quite dizzy and her vision to become blurry. Letting out a violent shiver next, she proceeded to wrap her pink sweater around her even closer, although her sweater didn't really do all that much to protect her from the brittling cold that she felt, as it was made up of lace material and was probably crafted with the intent of fashion was opposed to actually keeping one warm. Her face was also grimaced and discovered how awfully dry her contacts had now felt on her eyes. She had no idea how long she had been out, and she knew all too well the dangers of keeping contacts in while sleeping. She had no choice. She would have to take them out. She didn't like the idea of reaching into her eye and taking out her contact without washing her hands first, but what other choice did she have? After all, she had no idea how long she would be here, or even if she had the chance to escape. Considering how feeble and ill-bodied she was due to her eating disorder, there was very little that she could do against anyone who had come to do whatever it was they were planning on doing to her. As she held her eye open and reluctantly pulled out her blue eye contacts, her mind wandered back to Cody. He had drugged her. That much was obvious. Would he be returning? Or was he the only kidnapper? Maybe he worked for someone else and was merely the delivery boy. What would her fate even be then? Maybe she would be sold off in the midst of some huge, disturbing human trafficking ring, passed on to meet the fantasies or pleasures of some disgusting piece of shit rich old man who was into sexualizing and objectifying people for only God knows how much money. Roxy couldn't help but wonder how much money Cody had managed to make off of her. She shuddered. Well, that would explain how he could afford the house then. Letting her now brown eyes close again, she leaned her cheek against the tiled wall, finding just a bit of comfort of how cool the tile felt against her now burning hot skin. Her mind traveled back to her parents. Now that she was gone, who would take care of them? Allow them to retire? She had worked so hard since high school, with her only goal to become as best as she could be and giving them peace someday. She couldn't even say that her good grades and high test scores came naturally to her. And it felt like she had to work extra hard in order to get the same grade that everyone else managed to come by so easily. Not to mention that in her chosen field of study, she was often ridiculed and underestimated due to the sole fact that she was a woman. She knew it was tough out there for women pursuing a degree in a male-dominated field, but the constant mansplaining by her peers, some of them which were even younger and less schooled than her, and blatant favoritism towards male students by the professors was infuriating, to say the least. A few times, Roxy had even been called out on it, only to be met by either uncomfortable silence or some half-assed joke about how it must be her time of the month to quit being an overly sensitive bitch. Well, she supposed that overly sensitive bitch was better than her letting them walk all over her. That wasn't to say that everyone in her classes were horrible, sexist pigs. She had made a few good friends that she rather liked hanging out with and studying together, and they were a big reason why she was able to keep moving forward. Unfortunately for her, though, it just so happened that the few people that did say obnoxious things to her tended to stick out in her memory a bit worse than people who didn't say anything. Yet everything was worth it. Because if she didn't do it, who would take care of her parents? Certainly, she couldn't rely on her brother. As much as she loved her twin, he was a prime example of where she would be if she didn't work hard and put on her share of shit. A high school dropout and unwilling to hold down any type of job. Roxy broke herself from her musing and jumped, and about a foot in the air she heard jiggling noises of the doorknob being twisted and turned, as well as an unmistakable noise of several keys being unlocked from the other side. She believed that she had counted 5 separate locks, though she couldn't completely be sure. She would have to remember to count next time. Simultaneously, her heart rate began to increase in anticipation. Here, entering her room, would be the perpetrator of her unfortunate situation. Would it be Cody? Or someone else? What were they planning to do to her? Would they hurt her now or later? Would she get answers? The door swung open, and inside walked a person completely decked out in the same type of equipment that she had seen doctors and nurses wearing in pictures and new articles related to the virus. Except for the respirator mask that seemed to be a little over the top, as most just wore N95 masks as far as she knew. It wasn't like she was a medical professional or anything though, so she couldn't be sure. This made her wonder though, was she sick? She certainly felt sick. With her fever and headache, brown eyes narrowing in the person's direction. It was then that she noted a single strand of brown hair sticking out in the harness that the person was wearing in order to protect their hair. Cody? Roxy called out, her voice cracking a bit due to dehydration. The person ignored her question, instead merely reached out towards a high shelf high enough above Roxy's head and pressed a button on some type of device before he began to speak. As soon as he uttered his first word, Roxy was absolutely certain that the person was indeed Cody, as she recognized his voice immediately. Yet, something was off about him. He was very different. His voice was cold, stiff, and businesslike, down to the point, robotic, and no nonsense. September 15th, 20 redacted. The time is 10:30. 6 hours after the initial injection of Project FI. Second strain. Chills and dehydration observed upon entrance of isolation room. Subject H4A appears to be alert and oriented. Did I say it right? Pausing his apparent note-taking, Cody took a moment to grab a temporal thermometer from its place on the shelf and next to his recording device and pressed it against Roxy's forehead, running the thermometer across the expanse of her forehead before coming to a stop on her temple. Upon hearing the beep and an indication that her temperature had been taken, Cody glanced at the numbers on the screen before continuing to speak. Temporal temperature of 101.3. H4A grabbing the head, indicating a headache. "What's going on?" Roxy demanded, quickly growing irritated towards Cody's dismissive attitude towards her. Cody, however, simply ignored her and continued to vocally record other notes and observations that he was making regarding Roxy's current state, still in the same unnerving, monotone voice. After a few more notes, it would seem that Cody was finished for the time being, for he reached a hand up and hit the stop button on his recorder. Roxy thought that she may have heard him mutter something that sounded like "Shut up, 17," but she wasn't sure. Cody turned around once again and made to leave the room, still without even acknowledging Roxy or her presence, and it pissed off Roxy even more than if he were to make fun of her or taunt her. Dehumanization, and his refusal to even accept the presence of her humanity, was such a lonely, isolating feeling. Even more isolating than the longest quarantine, stripping away the very last thing that held her place in the world, her existence. "Look at me!" Roxy couldn't help but shout, but her words didn't even seem to faze Cody in the slightest. He merely continued to walk away with his back turned towards her, shoulders slightly hunched over and posture slumped. He looked like he wanted to stuff his hands deep into his pockets, but was unable to due to his disposable isolation gown that he wore over his clothing. The swishing sound of a key ring that was obviously tied to his belt loop jiggled and cut through the otherwise debilitating silence. Letting out another growl, Roxy scrambled to undo the heavy metal charm bracelet that dangled from her bony wrist. It was a charm bracelet that her parents had scrapped enough money together to buy for her upon being accepted to university. The time that she had received it, it was just the band and had one lone charm. Yet, as time went on, she had acquired more chains for special occasions from people like her parents, her closest friends, and even her twin brother. She cherished the charm from her brother the most, for it was the one that she had received when she had finally agreed to get professional help for her eating disorder. Everyone who knew her well knew that her bracelet was exceedingly special to her, a piece of the heart from all the people important to her, but now it was her only weapon. And doing the clasp at the last minute, she extended her arm back and chucked it, managing to catch Cody's strand in the back with it. Cody paused for a moment, and she was pleased to see that she had managed to invoke some type of reaction out of him. Stooping down, he picked up the heavy bracelet and held it between his forefinger and thumb, dangling it at eye level as he observed the bracelet through critical green eyes that rested behind the blue lenses. Shaking his head, he allowed the bracelet to clatter to the floor and kicked it out of the room before making his exit. It was at that point that Roxy knew that Cody would never let her be a person again. Her right to be a person was gone. Damn. Damn. Anyways, y'all, that's all we're gonna read because I'm gonna lose my sanity. But oh my goodness, y'all. First of all, what the fuck, Cody? What the fuck? And second of all, for Cody again, you sly motherfucker. You is sly. Oh my goodness, he's sly AF. He is very fucking sly, bro. Very fucking sly. And also for Jossie, I kind of feel bad for her because, you know, poor Jossie, man. She deserves better. And for us, we need to get shit together. We need to find out who we like more, or if we like both of them and we can ask them both out. We need to figure it out. Sis, we need to figure this out. But anyways, y'all, let me know what you guys think is gonna happen next in the comments down below. Do you think that Jossie and Ryan, this is eventually as the chapters go on, do you think they will eventually find out what the hell's going on? Or do you even think Jossie will survive to be able to find out what actually is going on? Or will she even be an experiment? Who will know? Give me your best guess in the comments down below. For me, I don't know. I have a feeling that Jossie may either die or go to jail or just kind of disappear slowly away from the story and then be brought back in, either in a terrible state or in a dead state. So I am not too sure. I'm not sure. Or in the rare chance that she was able to go back to her family and connect with them more and tell them everything and recover. That's also a possibility as well. That was a ginormous possibility. But I also like kind of have a feeling that Cody did not wipe off Jossie's weapon, but I'm not 100% sure. Like, maybe, because he only said for you. Like, and maybe Ryan thought like, oh, he did it for us. He wiped the weapon for us. And then I'm thinking like he only wiped the weapons that are yours, that you touched, not hers. So she could go to jail instead of you. I'm like, oh my goodness, what is that? I don't know. I'm having like these little theories in my head. Oh crap, we'll see. But anyways, I do have to cut this a little short, but I do hope you guys did enjoy this. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more amazing videos, guys. Oh, I'm so excited till we get back to the series soon enough. So yeah, y'all, I'm excited for this. I'm so excited I'm finally able to read the story because I have been dying to read the story because this story is like fucking good. It's getting good. It's always like, it's like my favorite current story that we're reading other than like The Nurse and Yandere Slasher, the sequel one. So yeah. Anyways, your girl sadly gotta go. So yeah. Your girl sadly gotta go. So I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I shall see y'all in the next futuristic video of either this series or maybe in another series that you guys would like to visit or, you know, try out and see if you like it. But anyways, your girl's gotta go. Bye and peace.